Guys, I want to share a life secret with you that I learned over the past few years making my channel, and that has to do with attention itself. You see, our attention span works much like a Wi-Fi does. Just imagine for a minute how your signal is when it is just you and perhaps your family members in your house versus maybe a gathering of 50 people coming over and streaming on your Wi-Fi. Our attention span works almost the same way. And not only that, but there is a quote that I can recall that when two or more people believe in a vision that is much bigger than both of themselves, they both can align and triple the abundance. So I have a few quarters here with me. I would like to share just a simple example of this. I have a simple penny, and then we're going to start with one coin representing myself, for example. If I start to tell people that this penny is one of the rarest pennies on earth, it is just me holding that belief. It is just me holding that idea. It is just me that is trying to make the assumption that this penny is the most rarest one on earth. And therefore, because it is rare, it is scarce. And because it is scarce, it must have extraordinary value. But when a second person comes along and starts to look at this penny, and they start to believe the same thing that I believe, now there is more attention and focus on this penny. The value of this penny has now gone up because a second person also agrees that this penny is rare. It is valuable. It is scarce. There are really no other ones like it. Now we add in more people to the equation. Now the focus is all converging on the penny. This is the convergence of reality and imagination and belief systems. This is the convergence of many things, and you can use this template in your life to see how attention spans really do work. Because there is the inner attention span to what is going on within our body, but we also have externalized attention. And this channel has taught me over the past year and a half that we can be too externalized with our attention. We can look outward to everything out there in the world of things and always deny what is going on within ourselves. So there is the whole concept of introvert and extrovert, but mainly when it comes to attention from the first person view, we can lose ourselves in so many ways like this because we can start to join in with the mass consensus that something is rare, that something is unique enough that it must hold an intrinsic value that is above and beyond what the normal average person could afford. So why am I making this video? Why am I talking about attention? Well, through my channel, I have also learned how mass media works in many ways when it comes to this. Because the more people that can focus their attention onto any given object and the belief system can be formed around it, then there is a collective agreement that this is how something is. You can take different major events throughout history where we have 24-hour news coverage wall to wall of any given event. And you can start to understand how the more people focus on it, the more that the news is pushing the narrative, pushing the agenda, pushing the ideas into our heads that we start to believe something to be true. It is like the old saying that you can tell a lie long enough and it becomes real. So likewise, when it comes to our own self-story, our own self-beliefs, our own inner dialogue is pretty much like an affirmation. If we begin to think about ourselves in a certain way, and we begin to reinforce that idea over and over in our mind, then we start to accept that as being real. It is reality to us as we know it. And I also learned that in many ways, the saying that we are living in a simulation has a lot to do with the stimulation that is happening on our nervous system. Our nervous system is our inner dashboard, right? We have our check engine light, or check the oil. You know, we have the fuel gauge that's telling us if we are empty or full, emotions or feelings, and how many miles can we go on this tank of gas. So there are a lot of ways that you can explain things through templates. I happen to like this idea of being able to use coins as a way to demonstrate how people can converge their attention onto a single thing and magnify this, right? So this comes back to imagination and belief systems. And I wholeheartedly believe, now that I've had time to be producing content consistently, that this is very true, because I look back at certain videos and I think to myself, wow, I didn't expect for that particular video to be the one that's my best performing video, while this one over here is one that I imagined, thought about, and even planned out, and it turned out to be one of the least viewed videos. But the one thing that has happened throughout this whole process is I've not given up. I've continued to go. So that brings me to something else, and that is commitment. The average person that I have observed, and this is no offense to anyone, that commitment fear is a real thing. Oftentimes, we require to be given something before we are willing to give something. And if we are holding on to the idea that we are owed something before we can give, then how can we ever increase our abundance when we are in a lack mentality? Now, guys, this one really was a eye-opener for me, because yes, I have to admit there were some things in my own life that I had to reevaluate and ask myself, am I in a lack mentality when it comes to my own abilities? Sure, I've been DJing for about 25 years, and many years before I ever took a stage, I had visualized and daydreamed about it. But DJing in front of a lot of people is a lot different than speaking to thousands of people in a room, or either on YouTube. Being on a camera is completely different than being behind a DJ booth playing music. So while I may appear confident in one thing, I could certainly come across as shy, timid, or unsure of myself in another area. Much in the same way that animals can pick up on our own senses, right? An animal can usually tell pretty good if you're confident. You never want to just approach a horse and be fearful, because the horse can pick up on that. That is maybe an old wise tale, but it seems to hold a lot of truth. So when it comes to things that requires us to focus our attention onto certain events or certain objects or certain belief systems, this does have a magnifying effect. And it truly does not matter if it's positive or negative when the group census is in alignment. So one of the things that through noticing and self-awareness that you begin to realize, especially if we use the news as an example, that the 5:30, 6 o'clock news is often pretty negative. There are plenty examples of what is wrong with so many things in society, but rarely ever is there a whole segment about all the wonderful good things in life. And that is honestly by design, because the more we can capture your attention and have you hold to a belief system or have you hold to a consensus about certain things, the more that Wi-Fi signal of attention is being distracted, it is being choked off. And if you think about it, just how water moves through a water hose, or even a milkshake. If you've ever gotten a milkshake that was super, super cold, you know how hard it is to pull that milkshake up through that straw. And then you get a ice cream headache, right? You have a brain freeze. So in many ways, our attention can be divided just like a pie in so many ways that we leave none for ourselves. And that is the part about returning home to self that I learned during this whole channel. I also went through a stage of identity, because on the one hand, my DJ company is called Newlywed Entertainment. But on the other hand, my YouTube channel is something completely different. My YouTube channel covers a whole lot of different topics. So I wanted to be able to separate the two. But over the long run, I started to understand with branding and branding ID and brand recognition that it all comes from me. Everything that I have been working on, it all comes from my imagination. It all comes from the same source. So in many ways, that helped me to understand persona. It helped me to understand the ego. It helped me to understand myself, because I also reflected on my name itself. Who am I? Really, truly, who am I? Well, most people say whatever their name is, that's who I am. Well, what do you do? So we really don't know, do we? Unless we have purpose, unless we have the why factor, unless we have gone back home and found our inner knowing, sometimes it's hard to answer those questions we've never really been asked. Who am I, and who wants to know? That is a very interesting self-reflection question, because on the one hand, I was born as Nicholas, but most people know me as Nick. And when I really started to dig down deep into it, there were a lot of different personality traits that I was able to identify when I put it on paper. When I wrote a column, Nick, and then I wrote a column as Nicholas, and I started to write different aspects of the name itself, I started to realize that there is an internal separation within myself where the inner child, so to speak, was compartmentalized as Nicholas. The inner child, the sweet, innocent boy, was protecting himself by the persona of Nick. And honestly, I didn't know I was doing it. So there is that split personality aspect of things, right? So we have different faces for different groups, different personas for different groups, different ways of acting and behaving for different groups. And I just recently came out of meditation, and right before I went in, I had saw it was a trailer where a guy was breaking down the Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire. And at the end of the movie, there was a very interesting point that once he made the choice to be Spider-Man again for himself, not out of vengeance of his uncle. So that was when he became honest with himself and his intentions, and he was able to become Spider-Man again. He also let Mary Jane go, and that was the moment that she chose him. So we arrive at choice. This was something that really stuck out to me, because we always have choice when we are consciously aware of what it is in the present moment that we are doing. Why are we doing it? What is the purpose? And why is such a big, important thing to realize here. The whole concept of choice, that brings me to something else. There's another movie that has a very similar tie, and that is The Matrix, because Neo had to have choice. The human condition needs choice. To be able to make the choice for yourself is something that we all desire. So sometimes, just because somebody says something is rare, it is scarce, and that it must have value, does not always make it true, does not always make it reality. You take oil, for example, and the time that the United States itself was on the gold standard, and then we switched. For some reason, the price of money became pegged to the price of a barrel of oil. And most people are not aware that oil is one of the most abundant liquids on this planet. And therefore, the only way to get people to buy oil was to present it as something that was rare. This might be the last barrel of oil that comes out of this ground. This might be the last time that we are able to pump from this ground. Now there's a scarcity. Now there's a panic. Now people are being driven by their emotions without being able to logically, consciously make choice. And that is something that plays out through the human condition in many generations over time. So I am very honored and very grateful to be able to share some of these life lessons with you guys, because for me, I did go through many different stages on my channel when it came to self-awareness and really checking my own mirror, so to speak, because there are times where I had to change internally something that I didn't like, because I understood that I could not change something on the outside of me. I cannot change another person, but I can change my response. And if there is something in my life that is negative, then the only way for me to not notice it anymore is to pull my attention away, to take my attention span away, to deny my sensory input until it goes away, until it disappears, until it is no longer a part of the repeating thought patterns that are creating a stimulation on my nervous system. And that was probably one of the most profound self-realizations that I've had during this whole process, guys. And I'm dead serious about it because it really was an eye-opener for me when you start to understand this same concept of when one person says it's valuable and another person believes it, and then another person joins in, and then another person joins in. Now, collectively, this is more valuable. However, let's take that same concept, let's take that same template and say that one person says this person is a bad person. Then they get somebody else to join in by talking about this person in a bad way. So now there's an agreed consensus. And as you can see, it goes on and on and on. Kind of like rumors, kind of like gossip, kind of like secret competition, right? To down talk somebody else to make yourself look good. That is actually a thing that happens in the human condition. I've observed it, I've experienced it, I've been on both ends of it, honestly. And it wasn't until I really became aware of how that dynamic worked was I able to really make an educated, conscious choice to either participate or to not give it any attention. And that, my friends, was one of the biggest life lessons that helped me to change myself and helped me to continue my journey here on YouTube and helped me to continue to grow my channel and also evolve at the same time. Because just as much as you can draw negative attention onto something, you can also flip that and make it positive. So this is a swing of the pendulum in some ways, but it also really highlights how attention works, because a group consensus will always make other people want to join in on it, no matter what it is, because most people don't want to be the one that is going against the tide or the opposition. Speaking of opposition, I have also learned that some people are wired backwards. They will do the opposite just because, and there's really no way to explain it. Some people indeed do the opposite, is either out of spite, out of not knowing, or just thinking that always doing the opposite is going to get what they want. And that comes back to something like negative attention. Sometimes when people are acting out, attention is really all they want. They want the attention. And for some mean, they feel the only way to get that attention is to act out. And then once you have their attention, are you able to solve the problem? Are you able to come to a solution? If not, then maybe that was never the problem in the first place, which reinforces the idea that somebody wanted your attention, and they did it by a negative means. Once you understand the intentions behind this, and once you understand how the dynamic of energy is working here, you start to understand where your focus goes, your energy flows, and it magnifies. So guys, it works like a funnel. We can only pay attention in our conscious mind to so much at one time, but our subconscious mind is always going. Our imagination is always going. It never really stops. So you can actually listen to affirmations overnight and your brain is always listening. These senses never shut off. Your smell never shuts off. These things actually send neurons through our mind the same way that our eyes do. They are electrical impulses that all shape the imagination of our mind, the mental images that we see in our imagination. Some people are really good and have really honed and trained their imagination and really tuned it in, fine-tuned their imagination. Other people might be really good at certain things, but these are learned mimic things from the outside world. And that was something that through my channel I learned also, was that some people are not as imaginative, or either they have never really been taught how to internally nurture the garden, foster the imagination, and learn to work with that inner monologue within. You don't have to be at war with yourself. And that is something that will bring you inner peace. That whole concept of the devil and Jesus on your shoulder, right? It's like cliche for cartoons where you have the good and the bad on one side, and you have these opposing forces that are struggling to really control you, right? So in many ways, we start to understand the left brain, right brain, and this again brings us back to convergence. All of the energy is converging right through the center, which is where the pineal gland is positioned. So where does the images and imagination come from? Where does that monologue inside of our head come from when our mouth is not moving, but yet we can still hear the sounds with our ears? That sound is not on the outside world. It is not another person speaking outside of you. That voice is coming from within. Those images in your imagination, they are coming from within. And we don't really know these things until we start to slow down and start to notice and start to pay attention to that inner voice inside of us. And I hope for you guys out there that this kind of makes sense to you, because it really did once it started to click inside of my own head that there were many things that I was in the past I was ruminating about. In the past, I was holding inner conflict. I was holding grudges. I was holding resentment towards circumstance. And that makes us take on the viewpoint that we are a victim to circumstance, when really, once we have gained the conscious choice, we are no longer held to whatever we imagine about the circumstance. We can start to change the tide. We can start to change the flow. We can start to redirect our energy into other means. Months back, I made my first out of several semen retention videos, which, by the way, is complete abstinence. It is not just not having sex. It is also complete abstinence from any kind of pleasure. What I learned was the commitment issue. What I learned was it takes intention to go the extra mile, to do what you thought was not possible. Because it's not about breaking an addiction. It is about pushing yourself to a new level, a new boundary. And I also learned that, yes, indeed, there is a cycle that happens within the human body. And when you're not expelling your life fluids, it does go back into the brain, and it does give you new blood cells, and it does re-energize the brain. This is regeneration of the mind. And that is a very real thing. And I truly believe that wholeheartedly now, guys. I honestly do. So that is another thing that has helped me along my way to have the courage and the strength to speak about it. Because I'll be honest, 5 years ago, I would have never talked about the topic. I would have been so embarrassed about saying anything public that it would have never happened. And so those were some of the videos that I did that performed the best. And deep down inside, I was in a lot of fear that they would just bomb. They would hardly get seen. And then people would just laugh at me. But in fact, the opposite happened. And I found that to be very interesting, because it was almost an inversion of what I was thinking, what I was feeling. But I'm glad it happened, because I needed to see the difference in how I was presenting myself and how I was thinking about how the presentation was going to come off. Perhaps there were many times I was overthinking things because I was too busy trying to get the next video up, instead of paying attention to the wake that I was leaving behind, much like a boat. So guys, I am very grateful to, I just get up here sometimes and I do impromptu videos, no script, no pre-hand writing. It is just all from the top of my head. And I want to extend my gratitude to every one of you out there. And I hope you drop some comments below, and I'd love to hear from you. What is your idea about attention itself? Because, growing up, I was diagnosed with ADD, but I also, as an adult, was able and fortunate enough to really learn how to meditate. There's no right way or wrong way. The goal is to be still. The goal is to allow the inner voice to be heard. And the simplest way to do that is to breathe. Close your eyes, sit still, and breathe. Find some soothing music of any kind. Really, you don't have to have a specific type music. Preferably something that is peaceful and calming, and maybe a calming environment. Low lighting, or early in the morning when the sunrise or sunset. Just somewhere that puts your whole body at ease, and that breaks the tension, right? Because when we start to breathe, we start to become present, because it takes intention to take over the breath. The breath is one of those automatic things, right? We don't think about breathing until we think about breathing. And that is where we interject the mind and we stop the pattern of thought. And when we do that, we become present. And when we become present, we start to lose the tension in our body, right? When we speak of things of the past, we use past tense speech. When we speak of things in the future, we use futuristic talk. But when we speak in present tense, we break the tension of the past and the future, and we become present. We are able to experience the gift of life in the present moment. Life itself is the gift. And being present means that we are not bound by previous beliefs. We are not bound by previous things that have happened in our life. We are not bound by what others think or their opinions. We are truly being present. And at the end of the day, that is truly the gift. And guys, I'm very grateful to say that to you, because it's true. So I'll be seeing you guys very soon. If there's anything that you would like to hear specific, any type topics, please let me know, because I enjoy learning things, and I enjoy really pushing myself to the boundary when it comes to producing content for YouTube. And I'm always very grateful, and I appreciate you guys very much. And I will be seeing you very soon.